Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here, and we are at the workshop of Aurum Effects, Eric Newgard. Eric, great to see you.
Good to see you, Norm.
Now, we met Eric over at Monsterpalooza this year, and we love the finished work of these hand props you've made, and so we wanted to pay a visit to your shop to get a sense of how you do some of these finishes, how you turn something from a flat casting into a beautiful, shiny, brilliant prop that can evoke different metals and materials. What is the prop that you're going to be building today?
So today we're going to be walking through the painting process for a Leviathan axe from God of War, the most recent one. This is a kit that I got from Eric Jarman from Jarman Props. You can find him on Etsy and Instagram. It's a great kit. I've already done all the body work for it, so we won't be covering that right now, but I will be going through the process for getting a really believable high sheen metal finish, as well as wood and how to weather everything after it's all put together.
Yeah, in the prop making projects that we've done, of course, so much of the work comes in the preparation, the body work, right? You never know how your castings are going to come if you buy a garage kit, but you've done all that sanding stuff already.
Yeah. Well, I think that painting is 90% prepping and 10% actually painting. So everything is staged right now for painting. So everything that's going to get one color is separated. Everything's separated by color, basically. So it's a nice way to build anything if you can separate it by material. So if you got all the gold pieces separate, so you don't need to do any masking. The problem with masking is that a lot of the times masking can detract from the believability of a prop because you get those like lines. You can like weather it as much as you want, but having separate pieces lets you kind of do more with the finishes. So we've got the parts that are larger. They're hung on these thicker metal wires. So these are going to get hung up on some hooks, and then we're going to paint them. We're going to prime them and paint them separately. And then all the smaller pieces are stuck onto wooden sticks using double-sided Gorilla Tape. And that's all we need to do at this point. As soon as everything is all prepped like this, ready to go, the next thing will be to get all the dust off of it, because you don't want to have any dust particles contaminating your piece. That's how you get fisheye and unpleasant things. Dusting it off, and then prepping it, cleaning it, wiping it with a really fine microfiber towel, and then we can paint it from there.
All right, then let's let you get some paint coats on here and talk about that process.
Sounds great. Let's do it. So we're using a giant paint booth with a fan right here. But if you're doing this at home, wear a respirator, because this stuff is really bad for you. This is a crucial part, because if you don't get the dust out now, it'll be in your piece forever. So first, with this primer, the Duplicolor, I like to put down a light mist first. It kind of helps it bite, helps the next layers bite down better. If you put this one on too thick right off the bat, you're not going to get your recessed areas or your corners or your grooves and things like that. Oh boy, come on. Word trick I've learned is if you're like me and you're running out of paint in your spray can, hold it vertically. It will come out.
Eric, you got your first coat of primer on. Well, actually, you did a couple passes, and when I was watching you, it was really cool because you were meticulous about it. More meticulous than we are back in our shop. Can you talk about your process?
It depends on what kind of paint I'm using. Right now we're just using spray paint because it's quicker. Also when you're doing the metal finish, it doesn't really require you to use any kind of two-part or automotive paint for the base coat, because you just need to get a black base coat down if you're going to do the metal finish. So as long as it's like a nice primer, you're going to be good. So what I used for this was the Duplicolor, which is a little bit, it's like one step up from the Rust-Oleum, which takes a little bit more care, requires a little bit more care when you're putting it down. So I just put down a light coat first to help the second and third and fourth coat bite into it a little bit better, and let that dry for a couple minutes before putting down the second coat and then building up from there. Once you get to the third and fourth coat, then you can start really being aware of the little nooks and crannies that you're missing, because those are really easy to overlook. So that's why I use my phone with the light to kind of help me see if there's any little details that I'm missing. And for the other parts of the axe, I just use the Rust-Oleum filler primer, because these have a lot of details in them, as you can see. And the difference between the sandable primer, Rust-Oleum, and the Duplicolor is that the Rust-Oleum is more forgiving. So if I were to do that with the Duplicolor, it would cake up in the cracks and then it'd look bad. But the Rust-Oleum one, I was able to lay it on a little bit thicker so that it can fill every single detail without missing anything.
You are taking your time, and of course now waiting for this to dry so you can do the clear coat for the metallizing.
Yes.
Eric, while we're waiting for the paint to dry, let's go over some of the materials you're using for this project. We've seen a lot of traditional shop materials, from cleaning supplies, rattle cans, acetone, but also some stuff that we haven't seen because we are in a car shop. What are you using for your paint finishes?
I begin with simple primers and stuff. I like to use the sandable primers, as I've mentioned. The clear coat I like to use is this Transtar. This is a two-part clear coat, which means you're going to mix the catalyst into the clear coat, and then you're mixing it up, and then it'll cure as it's sprayed onto your piece. This is an accelerator or kicker to help that go faster, which is optional. But the really important material for getting that metal finish is this paint. It's called Alumoluster. It's a little bit pricey, but the result is really great. An alternative for this would be like Alclad Chrome, which you may have heard of before. A lot of people are using this now. That's what we use to get the metal, really nice shiny metal finish, is this stuff right here.
For that clear coat, why use a two-part clear coat as opposed to just something out of a rattle can or something that you can put in an airbrush?
If you use a rattle can, like a gloss clear coat, you're not going to get a perfectly smooth surface. You can get, if you hold it at a distance, it'll look glossy, right? You can see a reflection and everything, but if you look at it really close, you'll notice there's like dips, and it's not a perfectly smooth finish. If you've ever wet sanded something to like perfect shininess before, you'll notice that you can see a lot more. If you want to get something to look really metal, you got to use this stuff. I mean, you can achieve something really close with that spray can gloss, but it's not going to be quite as convincing.
It's part of the preparation, right? Like the Alumoluster is going to work its best when your clear coat is as smooth and as shiny and glossy already as possible.
And it even comes back down to the base coat. If your base coat isn't a perfectly solid black, or if you're missing spots, if you can see gray underneath or whatever your base color is of your piece, those areas aren't going to be really, really lustrous, and that's what you want. Or in this case, that's what you want, is a really lustrous piece. For anyone at home, you can use a gloss spray paint if you want. You can still achieve really nice. Better than just going to the store and buying like an aluminum spray paint and just spraying that down. This will still be better than. It's a one step up from that for sure, definitely. We're spraying that with a mini touch-up gun. This is an Iwata LPH 80. This is a really nice one. This is just the moisture capture, but this one is, I just like this one. It's small. And then for our weathering, we're going to be using oil paints and acrylics. So I like to use these oil paints from Winsor & Newton. We use that for some weathering, and we use these acrylics for some other weathering. And we're putting down some of that with the airbrush. And then finally, for some metal, weathering, for any kind of dry brushing purposes, I like to use this Krylon enamel. Usually I would say don't use enamels for painting and finishing and weathering, but this one doesn't behave like an enamel. I don't know why, but it is an enamel. This stuff's really good. You can also use like liquid chrome. That stuff's really great as well.
All right. Well, can't wait to see this stuff in action. A little time has passed, but we are checking back and everything's dry, and that's why I'm holding this, Eric. We saw you apply the clear coat first and then that expensive chrome. Now, tell me your thought process on how you apply that chrome using basically the same Awada gun.
So the goal is to achieve as smooth and as crisp a finish as possible with the clear coat, which is why we apply it with a touch-up gun with a 2-part clear coat, automotive clear coat, as opposed to a spray paint. Because if you want that metal, that metalizer, the Alumoluster, to really pop, if you want it to look really, really shiny, really metallic, you need to have as smooth a surface as possible. You should be able to look at it and see your own reflection in it, which you can here. If you hold up your finger, you could look at, you could see your cuticles and the dirt under your fingernails and everything. That's what you want to achieve. So putting on the second coat after the Alumoluster helps smooth out the surface even further, because typically one coat is good, but it's not going to be good enough to really give you a nice surface.
So you're sandwiching that Alumoluster with clear coats. And the clear coat, you have to act pretty fast. You're going for full coverage, but you're also moving because it is that 2-part catalyzed reaction. With the Alumoluster, you were taking a little bit more time. That's the workable time?
Yeah, so the clear coat, I had to work fast because I added an accelerator to it. So you also don't want to mess up your touch-up gun, because if you don't clean it out really quickly, it could start to cure inside your spray gun, and then that would that could do irreversible damage to your really expensive spray gun too. But the Alumoluster, since it's one part, you can take your time with it and put it down. But once it is put down, if you're doing a really brilliant bright finish as opposed to like a dark chrome or a dark metal, you're probably going to want to buff it a little bit with a rag or something like this.
Okay.
That'll help make it even shinier. You get a little bit of metal flakes settling on it as well if you put a lot of coats on it. So you're going to want to lightly dust off all the settled particles before you put on the last clear coat.
So the quality of the chrome, what type of metallic surface you're trying to emulate, is determined by like how heavy your application of Alumoluster is, and then of course the dusting. And what I love is that not only is this really reflective, it's also real smooth. And you're saying that you take real care into just removing little particulates as well. That's between your clear coats.
So you might be able to tell when you get some close-ups now or later, there are a few little fibers on it. So that's what happens when you get the pieces of the towel or your microfiber, or if you're working in a really dusty environment like I am right now, it can be difficult to get a flawless finish. But that's what we fix that when we weather the whole thing. So that'll help blend all the little imperfections that you might get on your piece.
Okay, so in the time since we caught up with you last, you also worked on the handle. Super sturdy, solid resin, isn't it? Wow. So I can see remnants of the primer, the red primer here, but it also has a bunch of brown on it. I guess, I'm like, oh, was it like 2 brown colors you put on here? And Eric, you told me how many are here?
I think I put 5 or 6 browns.
Oh, okay. Tell me about the application process for this.
So the first thing I had to do was look at some reference. So there was a lot of reference for the Leviathan axe on the internet. So I went and got some screenshots, but I also just looked around at other people's props and other screenshots other people took. And it seemed like the wood was kind of a more like red wood, so I didn't want to completely eliminate the red from the primer because I kind of liked it. So I took a darker brown first. I actually used this golden acrylic. Not actually golden, it's just the brand. Burnt umber and raw sienna, and I just kind of took the two colors and I did just a bunch of different variations, like a bit more of one color than the other, just getting as many different shades of brown as possible. And then I just kind of took a chip brush and got it kind of light, kind of sparse on the brush, because you don't want to lay it on too heavy. If you can lay it on thinner, you usually get those strokes from the brush. If you're using a chip brush, it's most effective because it'll give you that wood grain effect, and that's what you want. So then I just kind of lightly go over the whole thing with one color, let that dry a little bit, then I'll grab like a smaller brush, a smaller chip brush like this, mix a little bit more dark or a little bit more lighter brown into the color I already mixed, mix it up a bit, get it a bit more sparse, and then go over the whole thing again, kind of avoiding certain areas and making it a bit heavier in areas so you get that variation. It'll look a bit more organic and natural.
It totally looks layered, right? You're using mixes of different brown. I see even on the table here, you have a lot of your test applications for the paint. Do you have a thought process for how you use the different shades of brown? Do you go from one shade to a different shade to make it look like wood?
For wood, I don't go in a very specific order. Nature kind of occurs randomly, right? So if you want to emulate nature, you also want to kind of do it randomly. So when I'm layering it up, I just kind of go from dark to light, and if it doesn't look quite right, like if you can see the streaks are too noticeable in one place or another, I'll just take a little bit of a darker brown maybe and then kind of brush over it lightly and then do it again. Just keep going back and forth until it gets to a place that looks kind of seamless and more blended and as organic as possible.
Right. You're also taking a rag to it and smoothing it out.
Right.
As well?
Yeah. So what I actually did was I took this like kind of toothbrush, and well, it's not a toothbrush. I would get this wet too, and then I just kind of go along the length of the wood so that it kind of scrape. The water will kind of erase a little bit of the acrylic since it's water-based, and that kind of helps bring out some of the red too, because I wanted the red to pop as well. So you get kind of a nice spectrum of reds to darker browns to kind of a lighter, more yellow brown, and that's what I did.
The pieces right now look fantastic. The chrome looks really awesome on these pieces. The gold looks great. The wood looks great here, but you're not done, even before assembly. What's next on this build?
As it is right now, I'm not totally satisfied because it hasn't been weathered yet. So all the creases and all the grooves and the wood grain on this need to get a wash of black and then some browns to kind of make the details pop a little bit more, give it more depth. The same applies to everything else here. So the metal pieces need to get weathered. I want the details and the engravings to pop. So you gotta fill it with some darker color. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be darker, but for something like this, I would go in with like a black and a darker brown, maybe some grays, kind of make those pop a bit more. And same for these pieces here. And then everything will be assembled after it's been weathered, and then I'm going to give it one more pass of weathering to help bring all the pieces together. Yeah, absolutely. Marry all the pieces together.
All right, seems like there's a lot more to do, so we'll let you continue.
I'm the god of war.
It is beautiful, truly beautiful. It's really amazing to see all these different pieces come together. I love that you chose this prop because even though it's all cast resin, it looks like mixed materials. Right? Wood, you got metal, and then of course you also added some faux leather for the grip there. Everything coming together. I did see that you added one last weathering pass. Can you talk a little bit about what you did there?
So when you are using pieces, when you have a lot of pieces and you're putting your prop together, weathering it one last time kind of helps wrap everything up and marry all the parts together. especially if the parts have recesses. If they join together, then it helps a lot to weather the little seams where they line up too. Just kind of helps to blend it all together a little bit better. It's more authentic that way. If this was going to be used in a battle, if this was in combat somewhere, like it's going to be, get grime and dirt all over the place. So you want to make sure you capture that. You want to capture that.
And for a prop this imposing, this big, so you're moving it further away from you, you want to hold it just to see it at different distances, because that can change how you see all the colors working to each other. Well, Eric, thank you so much for inviting us over here to Aurum Effects to watch you paint this prop. I know you work on a ton of different props, so all your information in the description below. Can't wait to see what you do next. But until then, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Norm.